because of falling debris, because of smoke, and because of structures of buildings that might continue to collapse. Mayor Giuliani said the death toll could be horrendous. He said the numbers are going to be very, very high. What we can tell you tonight is the city is confirming that some 265 firefighters are believed to be dead. The police chief saying among the dead, the chief of the fire department as well as the deputy chief, some 85 police officers missing tonight. CNN's Peter Viles takes us back to the start of this dreadful day. I need to warn you, the pictures are graphic. Some of you might find them disturbing.
Just before 9 a.m. Eastern, Americans awakened to shocking pictures from New York.
I just saw the entire top part of the World Trade Center explode.
Minutes earlier at 8:45, a hijacked plane had slammed into one of the World Trade Center towers. 9:03 a.m., a sickening sight.
Oh my God!
A second plane crashes into the Trade Center.
See the damage to that about the middle of the building. Just incredible what we are witnessing here.
People on the ground look on in horror as workers in the Trade Center towers fall, or maybe even jump to their deaths. 9:30 a.m., the president in Florida.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
The airport's being evacuated. They need to go home.
9:40, all American airports have been closed, but there are still planes in the sky. And minutes later, one of them crashes into the Pentagon.
Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal.
9:59, as the Pentagon burns, the South Tower of the World Trade Center buckles and collapses. 10:29, the second Trade Center tower collapses. An American landmark is in ruins.
Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car.
Thousands feared dead, lower Manhattan shrouded in smoke and debris. 10:48, police in western Pennsylvania confirmed that a fourth hijacked plane crashed a half hour earlier outside Pittsburgh.
Enormous loss of life there.
Noon, shock and disbelief. As the dead and wounded are taken to East Coast hospitals, officials in New York and Washington report a shortage of blood and appeal to Americans to donate their blood. Late afternoon, New Yorkers are evacuating lower Manhattan by the thousands. Parts of the city unrecognizable. A third building at the Trade Center, this one 47 stories, collapses. At Bellevue Hospital, an official says, quote, "It is a catastrophe of unparalleled proportions." Peter Viles, CNN, New York.
And if you were with us through Mayor Giuliani's news conference, you can see how tough it is for anybody to sort out the magnitude of what this city endured as well as what Washington endured today. I was on the phone earlier with a city official who believes the death toll will go into the thousands. Once again, that is impossible to even get a sense of the number of injuries and the number of deaths because of the fact that rescuers simply cannot get in to that perimeter area surrounding the World Trade Center because of fears of further structural collapse. I wanted to let you know what we can also tell you New Yorkers can expect in the morning. The city from 14th Street down will be closed off to civilians at least until Thursday. All New York City public schools, parochial schools, and private schools will be closed tomorrow. All, as I mentioned, all businesses below 14th Street will be closed as well. The nation's airports have been completely shut down at least until noon Eastern on Wednesday. The stock markets, as you can see on the screen, will also be closed. And you know that the news from the Asian markets that are now opening is not good, opening to a 17-year low. But once again, New Yorkers are going to wake up to a skyscape they barely recognized, the two towering World Trade Towers, no longer exist. And Wolf, throughout the next hour, we will hope to be bringing you more information from some of the trauma centers in the area that are trying to treat patients. We know for a fact some 300 victims are being treated at St. Vincent's Hospital, and we're going to go to our reporter live there to get a better sense of what their condition is at the moment.
Paula, President Bush was very succinct in his remarks tonight, insisting, quote, "Today our nation saw evil," confirming the worst fears when he said this: thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. He began this day on a routine assignment in Florida, promoting his education agenda when he got the word of the plane crash, the plane attack on the World Trade Center towers in Manhattan. He was immediately flown shortly thereafter to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana for security considerations. His security personnel not believing it was safe yet to return to Washington. From Barksdale, he was flown to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, home of the Strategic Command, where he remained for several hours, participated in a telephone conference call with his national security advisors. Eventually, it was determined that it was safe for him to return to Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington. He came in under unprecedented escort protection from F-15s and F-16s, eventually landing at Air Force Andrews Air Force Base outside of Washington. We're taking a look at some of those escorts that accompanied Air Force One on the way to back to Washington. And once he landed at Andrews, he was flown by Marine One, the Marine helicopter, to the south lawn of the White House. Once again, almost unprecedented decoy helicopters, Marine helicopters, joining him in order to get to the White House. The President spoke for just under 5 minutes, and he spoke from the heart.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you, good night, and God bless America.
President Bush speaking at the White House almost 2 hours ago from the Oval Office, his first nationally televised Oval Office address. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, is at the White House. John, from that address, the president met with his top national security advisors. What do we know about that meeting?
That's right, Wolf. The president immediately proceeded to that meeting at the White House Situation Room. It lasted a little under an hour, we are told. On the national security side, the president was brought up to speed on U.S. military deployments around the world, including the status of U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf region, as well as the deployment today of naval vessels from Norfolk, Virginia, up along the eastern seaboard of the United States. Also, that meeting was expanded beyond the normal national security meeting in a way to take into account the devastating effect of this tragedy. The Transportation Secretary, the Health and Human Services Secretary, and the Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency brought into that meeting as well to discuss with the President and his national security team the steps the federal government is taking to try to deal with the devastation of this. Now, we are told from sources earlier today that senior administration officials told key members of Congress that they are, quote, certain, based on the evidence they have gathered so far, confident based on the evidence gathered so far, that people and organizations associated with Osama bin Laden are responsible for this. But coming out of the national security meeting tonight, I was told by a senior administration official they do not want to jump to conclusions here. The administration will say nothing publicly about that. This official saying, quote, we're going to take a little time to sort this out. So the president being briefed by his team, he is here at the White House tonight. That meeting is now over, but look for the president tomorrow to have more public events. The goal here is to send reassuring signals to the American people. We are told the first order of business tomorrow is a bipartisan meeting with the congressional leadership here at the White House. Wolf.
And John, the president was also sending a very powerful signal to the enemies of the United States when he said this. Let me read this line from his speech. He said, we will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them, which suggests that some states may eventually be paying a price if the U.S. concludes that they were responsible as well.
It certainly does. The president's very strong words there come at a time this administration, and especially the prior administration, had been criticized for some by not taking stronger actions against the governments that have provided safe harbor and financial support to Osama bin Laden. Again, the administration publicly not assigning any blame, but we do know from the intelligence briefings provided to key members of Congress that is the administration's, at least the preliminary conclusion. Again, 3 sources I spoke to on Capitol Hill say administration officials used the word confident that the evidence they were gathering so far pointed to the bin Laden organization. Wolf.
All right, John King, stand by at the White House. I want to bring in our military affairs correspondent, Jamie McIntyre. He's at the Pentagon, which saw devastation there as well. Jamie, first of all, what do we know about the casualty count at the Pentagon?
Well, Wolf, just a short time ago, we got the first estimate of how high the death toll may be here at the Pentagon. It could be as many as 800 people killed, according to Arlington County fire officials, who say they've been told by Pentagon officials that the range of missing persons here is somewhere between 100 and 800. So that's the range that the death toll could take here at the Pentagon. Arlington County fire officials also say that the work tonight, as the fires continue to burn here at the Pentagon, is to remove some of the debris, take some of the front of the facade off so that firefighters can go in the morning in full force and try to put out what remains of the fires that, as I said, are still burning here more than 13 hours after the crash took place. Now, in addition, Pentagon officials insist that they're going to have the building open in the morning, at least large portions of the building on the other side that were not affected by this incident, as a symbol that the fact that the U.S. military headquarters has not been shut down by this terrorist action. Wolf?
And Jamie, just to remind our viewers, about 20,000 people on a daily basis go to work at the Pentagon, which is, of course, just outside of Washington. It was the Army section of the Pentagon that took the brunt of this attack, wasn't it?
Well, actually, it hit at the fourth corridor, if you're familiar with the Pentagon from your Pentagon days, in an area that had just been renovated. That actually is an area where there are a lot of Navy offices. There were also a lot of Army offices along this side of the Pentagon over here that was also affected by the blaze. A couple of interesting notes. One is that this marks a dividing line between where the Pentagon was just completed being renovated and another area that they were just about to start on. That meant that there were fewer people in both of those sections. In one case, because some people had not yet moved into new offices. In other case, because they had just moved out of old offices. And in the new area, which is on this side and didn't burn as much, some of the new improved fire security systems helped a lot, including a sprinkler system that was installed on one side of the Pentagon, had not been installed on the other. That was a big help in keeping the fire down.
And Jamie, while we have you, what have you been hearing about troop deployments by the military in the aftermath of this attack?
Well, I've only heard of one significant move so far, and that is the decision to hold the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf region. The Enterprise had just been relieved by the Carl Vinson in the Persian Gulf and was on its way home. Pentagon sources tell me that orders have been sent to the ship to hold up, to stay in the area of the Arabian Sea and await further orders, a signal that the United States may have something in mind in terms of some sort of a military reaction. Wolf?
Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. All right, please stand by. I want to go down to Bill Hemmer in Atlanta. He has more on this devastating day. Bill?
Yeah, Wolf, thank you. On a normal day, and underscore the word normal because we are far from that at this point. On a normal day, any airline that will go down the U.S. would be given what we would consider wall-to-wall coverage. But today in western Pennsylvania, just another element, another aspect of this still unfolding tragic story. To David Mattingly near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where United Airlines Flight 93 went down this morning about 10:20 a.m. David, good evening again to you.
Good evening, Bill. We are officially in the tiny town of Stony Creek Township, Pennsylvania. That's just outside Shanksville, southeast of Pittsburgh. The FBI here at the crash scene will confirm only one thing, that there were 38 passengers and 7 crewmen aboard the United 757 when it crashed here in a field of an old strip mining area. Officials at this location have been reluctant to call it an act of terrorism until evidence is uncovered that actually indicates this. In the meantime, there are hundreds of state troopers and emergency personnel securing the crash site, calling it a crime scene in preparation of a federal investigation. Now, witnesses in the area said the plane hit the ground at a 45-degree angle, causing a tremendous explosion, rattling windows miles away from here. All that's left of the 757 appears to be small pieces of debris, raising concerns that the investigation here on the ground could be a long and difficult one. Of course, the search is on for the all-important black box, the flight recorder. There is also a great deal of interest in what could be another key piece of evidence if it proves to be authentic. A 911 call originating from the plane and taken by a 911 operator in a Pennsylvania county just west of here. That tape is now in the hands of the FBI. If it proves to be authentic, it could be the lone surviving voice of an eyewitness on board that ill-fated aircraft. And with it, maybe some answers about what happened on board the airplane, and maybe some answers as to why this plane crashed here in this field instead of into another terrorist target. Now, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge surveyed the area earlier today, calling on Pennsylvanians to offer prayer and cooperation. As night fell, we began to see trucks coming by with trailers loaded with equipment that looked like communications equipment and lighting equipment, obviously preparing for a lengthy investigation here. Bill?
All right, David, thank you. David Mattingly in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Throughout the evening here, the human face has been put on this tragedy in more ways than one. We're starting to get an idea of some of the people who were on board the various flights that took off today, a partial list of some of the better recognized names on board. David Angel and his wife Lynn from Pasadena, California. The executive producer of NBC's Frasier, Wings, and Cheers was on board one of those planes. Daniel Lewin, 31 years old, co-founder of Akamai Technologies. Garnett Bailey, his friends called him Ace, director of scouting for the LA Kings, the National Hockey League. Also Mark Bavis, also a scout with the LA Kings, and throughout the night you've heard the name Barbara Olson being mentioned several times, a frequent contributor to Larry King Live and CNN through her legal commentary. Outside of that, we're also starting to pick up different stories across the country, repercussions from this story, indication that some gas lines in different parts of the country are snaking more than an hour or more in length. Also an indication that some people are afraid
New York City because they are regarded as major potential targets. They look at the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, and the George Washington Bridge, and also to a lesser extent the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and the Midtown Tunnel. And they're looking at those tunnels and they're trying to prevent anybody that looks suspicious from going across. Apparently what happened in this case is that you had two people in a truck who looked suspicious. Police gave chase. They stopped the truck. They found an entire truck full of explosives and they arrested them. Those two men and their explosives are in police custody tonight, and another tragedy has been averted.
Marcia, thank you for that information, and we're glad to hear that that was averted on this day. We've been talking all day, Todd, about the American blood centers, talking about the requirement for blood with so many people hurt and injured, and we've been told a lot of people showing up, which has been a great sign of the support of this town, but that some people have been turned away. A spokesperson for America's Blood Centers says, do not be discouraged. If you get turned away, your blood will still be needed. As you see there, type O blood is needed the most.
Yeah, I believe they were actually taking phone numbers and names today, telling people they would be contacted tomorrow.
Coming in the next few days. Also, blood is coming from Providence, Chicago, Milwaukee, supplies in other cities. It will be collected in New Brunswick and then brought to Manhattan hospitals. So the country reaching out to help this area during this tragedy.
Still, as many times as we look at the various angles of the effects on those buildings before they collapsed, in the aftermath, again, that's when the tower still stood. That's video we've watched all day of people running down the street away from the buildings. It still sends a chill up your spine.
And also just take it back a few days ago as we look at this. Here, this is I believe the second plane.
Impact, there it is.
The second plane. You can't see the other tower there as they, one shields the other.
And there they are, tumbling down.
Tumbling down all within just an hour, all of this happening, as well as the plane crash in Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, and also at the Pentagon. At least we do know, as the numbers in the city, the mayor wants to be very careful about the numbers in the city, but we do know the people on board the 4 airplanes, it has been listed as about 266 lives were lost.
And again, we expect many more casualties. It may take days, even weeks to count them. Right now, we're going to give you a glimpse of what happened at the scene in their own words.
We were in a conference room on the 10th floor and we saw a plane coming very low from this direction, and everyone said, wow, that plane is very, very low. It was kind of flopping back and forth and it just did not seem good, and then we heard the crash. We ran to the window.
Into the building. It went into the Trade Center.
It hit the Trade Center. We saw the shrapnel fall, and then we said, get out. And then by the time we got to the street, people said they saw a second plane come into the second plane was United. The first plane was big.
We heard the second plane crash into the building, but we saw the impact come from the other side. The plane crashed from the right side of the building, and the impact blew the left side of the World Trade Center out on the second building. That's all we saw, and everybody just panicked and ran.
I had to help a lady. She was on the floor. She passed out. We had to put water on her. A lady was giving birth down the block on the side of the sidewalk. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. What are you doing, in situations like this?
And we all started evacuating, and then people were saying it's better to stay in the building. And most of us kept going. We went down the stairs. It took us about a half hour, and we got out of the building. And they were saying, "Don't look up," they said. And they said, "Keep going, keep going."
We had a report of a fireman trapped over here on the northwest corner. So I'm going to make sure that we got people over there to help dig him out.
I went to see if my brother had left the job. I get upstairs, the building's on fire. I find him, we're watching it. We're trying to leave the subway. They're telling leave the subway. People are pushing people onto the platform. So they're like, we're standing there telling us the Pentagon's hit. We're listening to a call report, and then the building explodes. And we're seeing it, and it's falling. And it just, the smoke, and it just started coming. Everybody started running. You just had to run.
When we came out on the floor, on the lobby, there were still people on the floor, dead on the floor. There was a person encrusted on the floor. That's how big the impact was. As soon as we came out, we hear that the building was falling. We started running. We went inside, right under the fire trucks, because there was nowhere to go. Me and another 3 firemen, we went in on one of the fire trucks, and everything fell on top of it. So we almost get crushed over there. I just wanted to cry, to be honest with you. It's terrible.
The feeling so many people have had today. Again, we look at the dust, the debris, the smoke, the action, the fear. It all comes down to lives being lost. We have no idea at this point how many may have been lost. Some estimates are in the thousands, although Mayor Giuliani did say moments ago he still believes there may be survivors in the World Trade Center, in that rubble that you see there now.
Lights have been moved downtown as crews begin their rescue operation. On the phone with us earlier tonight, we had a news conference from the Port Authority, and the gentleman saying tomorrow will not be a normal commuting day. We have Paul Selzer from Metro Traffic to give us an idea of what's expected. Paul?
Hey, how you doing?
Good evening.
Actually, we do have a bunch of information that we are just getting in now. We do hear now that the Port Authority has announced that they are going to keep the Hudson River crossings, the Holland, Lincoln, and George, closed inbound into the city tomorrow. So it will indeed not be a normal commuting day. As far as the streets around the city, both directions of the FDR are going to remain closed from Battery Park Underpass to the United Nations. That will continue to be closed. The southbound Deegan, that will be closed at 230th Street. The northbound side is open. Southbound Henry Hudson Parkway is closed. That's by the Henry Hudson Bridge. Now the northbound will be open at the GW. The westbound Cross Bronx, that's open at Jerome Avenue. Delays are back to the Bruckner right now. Now the eastbound side is open. As far as the Belt Parkway goes, that will be closed around JFK. Obviously for police activity, a lot of the military planes have flown into JFK, so they'll be staging there at JFK. As far as transit goes, right now we will have limited train service from New Jersey Transit. Metro North is operating a suspended schedule right now, but we do understand that on Wednesday they'll return to a normal weekday schedule. LIRR service is back to normal right now. As far as the Upper East River crossings go, we are taking a look at that right now, and we do have reports.
Paul Selzer at Metro Traffic, we thank you for that.
Jennifer McLogan has been on the scene all day, and we've also been talking about the different emergency crews who've been coming in from all over the area to help out.
Jennifer?
Good evening. Long Island volunteers are now in this staging area of Shea Stadium, having just gotten word that 50 ambulances are now needed in Lower Manhattan. All of them are now headed to South Street. They have been speaking with us. We talked with EMTs from Glenwood Landing, Long Island, Bob Whiting and Scott Dade just a few moments ago, sharing their concerns. They had been here waiting since 2 o'clock today, a dramatic sight as they passed by Shea Stadium, 50 long lines, ambulances with their workers. We'll go to some videotape, hear from these men and their share some of our day with you from the airports as they were closed in the name of national security. Your feelings right now?
Right now, feeling of sadness, feeling of despair, knowing that all these people are in there trying to work on everything, and they're just, we've been through other incidents on Long Island with different things, so we know how they feel. We're here just to let them know that we're here to help them, and if we do get called in, we're going to be right there behind them.
Are you feeling a little helpless that you're not right there in the midst of things?
Well, yeah, we've been waiting since 2 o'clock today in this parking lot, trying to get in there to help. But even though we're getting closer to going in there and helping, we're still a little bit nervous about what we're going to see when we eventually get there.
Nervous because of the uncertainty, not knowing how bad it will be. Families came to the river's edge and watched in horror from the Queensboro Bridge Park as the second tower collapsed. What's going on in our country?
I have no idea. It's so very frightening.
Passengers driving into LaGuardia Airport stopped in their tracks, craning to get a glimpse, incredulous that one human being could do this to another. At Kennedy, SWAT teams and canine dogs swept for bombs inside the American Airlines terminal, and soon every plane on the tarmac was grounded and anyone flying in the air was forced into an emergency landing at the closest airport.
It's pretty horrible. Oh my God.
Absolutely
I can't
unreal.
believe this.
Can't believe this.
Awful.
In America yet. Wow.
Airports will be closed at least through tomorrow morning. Volunteers will be working through the night and standing by. As we said, 50 Long Islanders now deployed into Lower Manhattan, into South Street. We're reporting live from the staging area at Shea Stadium. I'm Jennifer McLogan, CBS 2.
Jennifer, thank you.
We now have with us a man whose job as a reporter put him in place to see much of what happened down in Lower Manhattan today, especially after the first impact of the first plane that hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. His name is Larry Kopsky with 1010 Wins, CBSMarketWatch.com. Larry, we're glad you came in here to talk to us. I know that you were in an office at the time of the first impact. Tell me what happened immediately following that.
I took a walk out on the street to see what was going on, and I was at the corner of Liberty Street and Broadway looking right at the two towers of the Trade Center, about a block and a half away, when I heard this horrendous explosion, and I didn't even realize that it was the second tower that had been hit at that point. The plane came from behind the tower from where I was standing, but there was this tremendous eruption of debris and fire from the building, and at that point everyone around me turned and started to run. In fact, I got pushed over a couple of times as I tried to take off as well. And I circled down around Water Street, got as far away as I could, and then came back up to just across from City Hall, where I was watching the two towers, where I had a clear view of them. And as I was watching, all of a sudden, the first of the two towers started to come down, and coming right up Broadway and Park Row was just this tremendous plume of gray smoke. And at that point, everyone started running again, including myself. And well, I didn't stop till I reached Midtown. I stopped running, but I walked all the way back up because there was no place else to go.
But you do, we have a camera behind you, because you didn't get hurt though, but you did get a lot of the debris and stuff that fell on you, big stain on the back of you.
Well, I think that was more from being on the ground than from kind of getting walked on by people. I don't really remember if I was pushed or whether I tripped or a little bit of both, but I didn't even realize that it happened, except that people, as they were coming by, were saying to me, "Are you all right? Because you've got this horrendous mark on the back of your shirt." And you know, I didn't even see it until I finally got to a mirror.
Can you tell us what it was like on the street as those people were running? What was being said? What was being shouted, screamed?
I heard people praying. I saw people crying. I saw people walking in disbelief. It seemed that the further north I walked in Manhattan, once I got, say, north of the Greenwich Village area, it seemed almost eerily normal.
Two different worlds.
Yeah, because there were trucks on the street. There was commerce being done. The stores were open, at least some of them. And then, as I crossed Madison Avenue somewhere in the 30s and looked downtown, and normally you can see those two towers right down the street, and there was nothing. And I was in that building at 8:35 this morning, getting off the train, and I can't believe it.
While you were walking, while you were running, what were you thinking?
I was just hoping not to get hit by anything. There was debris raining from the sky, and my biggest fear was that something was going to come down on my head. At one point, I tried to duck into a building lobby, and I kind of got pushed out. And fortunately, the worst of it was a little fall and a little scrape, and that was about it.
Coming off the summer of blockbuster movies, and we all have these scenes. We're going to Police Commissioner Bernard Carrick, I believe, is speaking live.
There he is.
This will include or relate to all pedestrian and vehicular traffic except essential emergency vehicles and personnel shall be prohibited in the following areas: Manhattan south of 14th Street, and that will be from East River to the Hudson River. The only vehicles that will be allowed in those areas will be emergency vehicles, police, fire vehicles, National Guard, and anything authorized by the police department. There will be some vehicles in the morning that will have to get down there for deliveries of certain things that we're familiar with already. They will be allowed in, and residents, that's it. Anyone trying to violate the order will be arrested and could be found guilty of a Class B misdemeanor. I urge people to follow the order. There's no need to come into Southern Manhattan tomorrow, and as a result of the order, the best thing to do is stay away.
Can you talk about this incident that came up on Channel 2 about some people coming across the Brooklyn, the GW Bridge explosives? Can you comment on that at all?
I haven't seen the report, and I haven't heard about anybody coming across the bridge with explosives. Okay?
Have you heard anything about the van on the Jersey side?
Well, I've heard basically the same thing you have. We haven't been able to confirm it yet. They weren't near the bridge, to my understanding. If it in fact did happen, we're trying to confirm it through our detective bureau.
One more question on this.
South of 14th Street, that includes all bridges and tunnel crossings south of 14th Street. Those are closed down for tomorrow.
Any movement south of 14th Street?
And you have not heard about any explosives on the George Washington Bridge or
No.
in the Lincoln Tunnel?
Nope.
Commissioner,
Thank you.
it was in Jersey near the bridge. Is that your understanding? Do you know the jurisdiction?
Well, what we heard was Port Authority police stopped a van that might have had explosives in it. We haven't been able to confirm it yet. We're working on it. When we hear something, we'll let you know.
That's on the Jersey side, right?
It's on the Jersey side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and we'll be back, so we don't have to go through this.
I'm just holding a press conference and talking about the tight restrictions on people who are not needed, non-emergency personnel who try to head below south of 14th Street tomorrow. That will be a very restricted area.
I think he basically said no civilian traffic south of 14th.
Period, or you will be.
If I was down at the 50th, they were down at the 80th.
It took 15 minutes to get out, but once there,
people had left their shoes to get away. I mean, there were piles of blood in the street of people who had gotten hit by shrapnel from the buildings.
Your wife, she said to me that she thought she was a widow.
I bet.
Kim White was stuck on the 74th floor of Tower 1.
The doors were locked.
Why?
I have no clue. We sat around for about 5, almost 10 minutes trying to find a door or get somebody with a key to come open the doors so we can get downstairs. We had those precious 5 or 10 minutes when it made that much of a difference.
A difference because she barely managed to escape as the building was collapsing.
Glass just flying all over the place, and we're not knowing which way to go because we didn't know which way the building fell. Once it hit ground, all you saw was blackness. I'm sitting here saying to myself, breathe properly, Kim, breathe properly, because you don't want to take in too much, because you're going to collapse, and no one's going to be able to find you because there's nothing but blackness.
And breathing wasn't easy, not just because of the debris. To make things worse, Kim suffers from asthma and suffered an attack.
Was there a time today when you thought you were going to die?
Oh, definitely. On at least 3 or 4 occasions. The initial explosion, going out to the reception area, seeing that ceiling collapsed, being stuck in a stairwell and not being able to get in. We couldn't go back up, we couldn't go down. My life didn't flash before my eyes. It was just trying to get down far enough where, I would be safe.
And to the safest place and person.
I just want to see my mother, that's all. I'll probably be 32 years old, sleep with my mom tonight.
Someone else's mother, Maggie Cusack, was also battling her way down from the 82nd floor of Tower 1.
The building just shook, and you could see the stuff kind of flying down. It was big. I mean, you could tell it was a large event. I believe all of my coworkers got at least out into the stairwells. I guess it was about the 27th floor. The firemen started coming up into the building. And I just felt that they were very brave, and we were kind of clapping for them and wishing them luck on their way in.
Are you thinking of the firemen because you fear that they were perhaps trapped in the building when it collapsed?
I think they probably were. I think there were a lot of them that did get trapped in there, and I think that's very sad. They were all nice, young, healthy, good-looking guys, and I'm just really grateful that I got out before the buildings collapsed.
A few moments ago,
NBC's Dawn Fratangelo with some of the people who went through the most terrifying day of their lives, their relief that they survived, their gratitude for the people who tried to save them, and their grief as well for their loss. Let's go to NBC's Rahema Ellis now. There is some, I'm told, exceptional videotape at Ground Zero. Rahema?
Tom, indeed, I have just come back from Ground Zero. It's like going inside a disaster. We have some pictures we want you to take a look at. There's an eerie light that's cast over the entire area. Fire crews are hosing down the smoldering remains. There are firefighters everywhere. They are literally sifting through the rubble, trying to see what there is, who they might be able to find. I asked one firefighter, it is hard to imagine that anyone could survive this kind of devastation. But one firefighter said to me, we never give up. We will continue to search through this area until the very last word is given that we shouldn't search anymore. They are hoping against all hope that they can find someone out of this rubble. Tom, it is almost unbelievable. It takes your breath away to stand in what was the center of America's financial area, and now it doesn't exist anymore. There is still dust, choking dust. The air is so thick, it's very hard to breathe. It's very difficult to see. The firefighters, however, as I say, they refuse to give up. We went 1 block away from Ground Zero. It is the staging area where all the firefighters are. We talked with one of the chiefs who told us that he felt that they were able to bring someone out alive. He couldn't tell me what the condition of the person was at this moment, but he said that's what his firefighters are there to do, to see if anybody has been able to survive this tragedy. Tom?
Rahema, did you see any evidence of people who were alive or hear from the firefighters around the ground about recovering some people who were alive?
No, Tom, I did not. Every firefighter I talked to only shook his head, lowered his head in disbelief and sadness, but again, with the determination that they were going to continue to search until all hope was lost of finding anybody alive. They are continuing that search.
Thank you very much. NBC's Rahema Ellis, the New York City police official who said earlier that he believed that people were still alive there. The hope may have been the father of the wish in that case. This day, you'll remember forever, whatever your age, wherever you live in this country. There are those days that, for the people who are alive in America, are etched forever in their minds. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. 1945, the end of World War II, victory over Germany and Japan, the death of FDR. November 22nd, 1963, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The age of innocence came to an end in America. 1968, the assassination of his brother and Martin Luther King. 1974, the resignation of Richard Nixon. 1989, the death of communism, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the liberation of Poland and Czechoslovakia. 1990, the release of Nelson Mandela. And of course, 1989 as well, Tiananmen Square and all that that meant to this country. 1968 also saw the landing of the man on the moon. And then the millennium, a new century, a new beginning of 1,000 years, new hope for this world and for America. 1 year in, on the 11th of September, the 9th month, 9/11/01, an act of terrorism that is tantamount to war, the most serious attack on this country since Pearl Harbor, the most devastating attack within the continental United States ever by a foreign force of some kind in more than 100 years. We'll all be tested by all of this, and we'll have continuing coverage. Many of your local stations will go to their local news now, but we'll have continuing coverage on this NBC station. Brian Williams will be here for a while, and I'll see you again at 11:30.
America under attack.
Who are trapped inside the rubble, but who are alive and able to talk with rescuers. We have been told that at least one of those people is communicating via cell phone. Efforts, of course, underway to free them now, top priority. And the commissioner spoke about the George Washington Bridge, not confirming the reports that were made on some outlets that there was a truck full of explosives that was captured.
5 sides caving in, the president vows vengeance. Good evening. Not since World War II has the United States suffered such a great loss of life so violently, so suddenly. Yet within the half hour, we've received some slightly encouraging news. Police Commissioner Carrick says there are people alive in the rubble.
We've just learned just now that there was a suspicious vehicle on Route 3 in New Jersey, and traffic is backed up for 5 miles. Tell me a bit more in the control room now. What's the nature of this? Okay, the police are checking cars. It may be an overabundance of caution, but there was a suspicious vehicle on Route 3 in New Jersey, and the police are checking cars. Therefore, there is apparently a very bad traffic tie-up right there. This dark day in history is being blamed on hijackers armed with knives who took over 4 airliners and turned them into missiles. First came the explosion at the World Trade Center, a double strike. New York's tallest buildings reduced to smoldering heaps of steel and concrete. Hundreds are known dead in the airliners alone. It's feared the body count from the buildings and on the ground will swell into the thousands. There is still no claim of responsibility for the attacks here and in Washington, but the U.S. military is on its highest state of alert tonight. And tonight there will be no break for rescuers who are searching the scarred landscape of Lower Manhattan for those who were doomed and for those who might have somehow survived all this.
Well, here's what the scene looks like right now in Lower Manhattan, a grim battle zone lit only by emergency lights. Today's events seem to unfold with almost military precision, and Ralph Penz is here with the timeline of terror.
Yes, Sue and Chuck, first of all, let me say that the worst fears have been realized tonight. President Bush is saying tonight that thousands of people have been killed in the terrorist attacks. His announcement, the terrible climax to this day of horrors.
Our way of life, our very freedom came under attack.
President Bush speaking to the nation tonight and giving the first indication of how massive the death and destruction may be.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
There is still a lot of flashing we can see in the air.
And tonight, explosions in Afghanistan. Are they swift retribution from the United States? The Taliban rulers in that country have been protecting Osama bin Laden, the terrorist leader that law enforcement agencies say is almost certainly responsible for this death and destruction today in the United States. But tonight, U.S. officials deny reports that President Bush ordered any attacks and point instead to anti-Taliban forces in Afghanistan. But also tonight, the president gave warning to any country that may be shielding the terrorists.
The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And here's how those attacks happened. 8:42 a.m., a hijacked airliner, American Flight 11 from Boston, 92 passengers and crew, is flown directly into the upper floors of the World Trade Center's North Tower. 22 minutes later, at 9:03, a second hijacked plane, United Flight 175, also out of Boston, 65 people on board, plows into the South Tower at a lower level. These planned twin crashes, creating massive death and destruction, and widespread panic. At 110 stories, the towers, second largest buildings in the world, housed as many as 20,000 people every day.
As I was turning, I saw a fireball coming through.
Then, 9:40 a.m., just 37 minutes later, outside Washington, still another hijacked airliner crashes into the Pentagon. In this recreation, you can see how the plane acts as a flying torpedo, reminiscent of the Japanese kamikaze pilots of World War II. Terrorist experts believe that on that jetliner, suicidal terrorists were at the controls after possibly killing the crew. Back in New York at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapses. Half hour later at 10:28, the North Tower goes down. Witnesses report seeing victims jumping from the high floors of the towers.
But there were people falling out of the sky.
And at 5:20 tonight, World Trade Center building number 7, which had been evacuated earlier, collapsed. That 47-story building having been impacted by the adjacent damage. And tonight, Utah Senator Orrin Hatch said U.S. intelligence has intercepted communications between Osama bin Laden supporters discussing the attacks. Further evidence, he said, of their involvement. And we're told that some of the passengers on those planes managed to report by cell phones that the terrorists were armed with knives and in some cases stabbed the flight attendants. And tonight, the White House says that in a telephone conference, President Bush told his national security advisors, and we are quoting, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation. We will do what it takes. No one," he said, "is going to diminish the spirit of this country." Chuck, Sue.
Ralph Penza, thank you.
The area where the Twin Towers used to stand looks exactly like a war zone tonight. The stories of horror have been told all day by the people who saw this disaster firsthand. And let's go right now to Tiwa Chang, who is in Lower Manhattan for us. Tiwa?
Well, Chuck, I'm standing 3 blocks from Ground Zero from the blast site on West Street, and thousands of rescuers behind me, along with hundreds of pieces of equipment, are being used. Everything from bulldozers, front-end loaders, generators, to try and search for some of the people who might have survived. If we zoom in, you can see that the fire is still going. That even now, you can see flames that just flared up recently, and there are firemen inside of there near that building trying to fight that blaze. We also saw canine dogs, police canine dogs, who were brought in because apparently they found some survivors, and they're now trying to locate 3 more. The problem is they are dealing with mountains of rubble more than 100 feet high. All night long, heavy equipment on semi-trucks stretching for miles was brought in to clear rubble to reach possible survivors. Potentially thousands of people may be trapped inside the rubble. There was once the Twin Towers, more than 106 and 110 stories each, now reduced to 15. This pedestrian bridge to Stuyvesant High School is 1 block north of Twin Towers. The heat twisted it. The firefighter union says that half of its 400 firemen who responded are missing. The site itself included a tire from what appeared to be a jet and what looks like nuclear winter. A building, concrete and steel, reduced to dust and powder, possibly including asbestos. As dozens of firefighters on their trucks went back to their firehouses to rest and return in the morning, people on the sidelines applauded for them, applauded for heroes who, like the police officers, risked and lost lives trying to save lives. You're looking now again at a live picture of Ground Zero. That's what's left of the Twin Towers, the North Tower. It's been reduced to about 15 stories roughly from 110 stories. Now as rescue teams search, even the city officials admit there will be few survivors and there will be many dead. As Mayor Giuliani put it, there will be more dead than we can bear. And one city official who asked to remain anonymous said there will at least be thousands. Now according to a federal source, they're saying that right now FBI and ATF agents are in there searching for the black box. That's the airplane's cockpit voice recorder and cockpit data recorder, so they'll be able to hear and know what happened. They are also getting search warrants now in Boston and Florida, where the flights originated, trying to see who was on, based on that passenger manifest, trying to find out who was on that plane. And one last thing, this federal source says that in all the scenarios the FBI conducted and the ATF conducted, almost all the attacks were from the ground level, as they were in 1993. Never, almost never from the air. Quoting the source, he said, "How could we even think that someone would fly a jetliner into the building?" Reporting live in Lower Manhattan, Tiwa Chang, News Channel 4. Now back to the studio.
Tiwa, thank you. Far into the evening, ferries are still evacuating people across the Hudson River from the devastation of Lower Manhattan. The crisis has been stark on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River also, as hundreds of survivors were ferried across the river for emergency care at triage centers at Liberty State Park and in Jersey City. Many of them were, quote, called walking wounded.
Tens of thousands of people desperately looking to get out of New York City after the attacks. People with no place else to go took the ferry to Weehawken, and that's where Roseanne Coletti joins us live right now. Roseanne?
It's an amazing people-moving operation all day long in Weehawken. Boatloads of people being ferried across the Hudson to the New Jersey side, flying to their home. For many, the long journey home is not. Weary and shocked by the events of the tragic day, passengers arrived by the ferry load late into the evening into the Weehawken terminal.
Pray to God to get to home. I have a daughter, 14 years old, who's waiting for me.
They estimate around 45 to 50,000 people have been evacuated through this location. Some, normally they would go through bridges, tunnels, whatever. They've all come by ferry because everything's been shut down.
Among the stranded, a visiting trade group from Quebec, scheduled for a show at the World Trade Center. Travelers who say they witnessed the Twin Towers crumble.
I don't know. For now, I don't know what to think. Probably it's more like tomorrow, the day after. You have to live with that memory.
Some, including more tourists and New Yorkers, are spending the night in a makeshift shelter at the Weehawken High School.
So as this was going on, there were one or two ferry boats there, and basically they sort of said get on the boats and go, so we just got on and left.
And you ended up here in Weehawken?
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
As I was going to my job, one of them fell, and everybody started running to the seaport, and they just got everybody on the ferry, took us over to Jersey City, and as I was on the ride to on the ferry, the other one fell down, and they just told us to come to this ferry, and there's no outbound to New York, so we have to spend the night here.
That was Roseanne Coletti reporting.
The search for survivors among the mountains of rubble is underway right now. Within the past hour, Mayor Giuliani updated us on the rescue effort and the state of the city. Political reporter J.D. Dapper is here now with more. Jay?
Long day for the mayor, long day for all of us. The mayor, like the rest of us, never thought he'd see a day like this, but tonight he is offering a ray of hope.
After touring the devastation, the mayor talked to New Yorkers within the hour.
There's hope that there are people that are still alive.
And the search for them has now resumed. City Hall looking ahead to the nights and days and months of recovery.
We just had a long meeting with all of the agencies to make sure they have the support that they need. They'll all reassemble here at 8, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and some of the critical people will stay here throughout the night.
This morning, the mayor and his aides ran from City Hall moments after they heard the explosion of the first airliner slamming head-on into the Trade Center's North Tower.
The most horrific scene I've ever seen in my whole life. We saw the World Trade Center in flames, a big gaping hole all the way on the top of it. We could see people jumping from the top of the building. And then we went into Barclay Street, 75 Barclay Street, I think it was, and we were there when the building collapsed, and it collapsed in part on 75 Barclay Street. So we were trapped in the building for maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
They found their way out into the streets just as the second tower collapsed. The mayor, the police commissioner, and fire commissioner running like everyone else, desperate to escape the cloud of soot and dust.
I say we still go north.
Blocks away in a firehouse, cell phones and police radios working poorly, if at all, the mayor got on the landlines to try and get a handle on the devastation. The facts cut deep. Hundreds of firefighters and police officers likely in the towers when they collapsed. A half dozen high-ranking officials and friends of the mayor missing, no contact. Others, like Corporation Counsel Michael Hess, trapped in offices adjacent to the destruction, barely escaping to safety. But tragic ends for 3 top men in the fire department.
Yes, we lost the deputy chief of the fire department and the chief of the department.
The mayor warned that anybody who might think of taking advantage of this, price gougers, for instance, or looters, should think again. The police will be out in force looking for this kind of thing tonight and tomorrow. Parts of Manhattan will be closed tomorrow, most of the island below 14th Street, for instance. Also, President Bush has issued a federal disaster declaration for the state. That means federal dollars are available to help with the cleanup. One more thing. You may have forgotten in all of this, today was primary day. The polls were open for a while. The election eventually canceled. No determination yet from the state when it will be rescheduled or how to deal with things like campaign war chests that are fully depleted. These things, though, obviously are secondary to the immediate task of finding the people who are still trapped in the rubble, any that might still be alive. Chuck, Sue?
R.J.D. Dapper, thank you.
Air travel at all three New York area airports and across the country was immediately suspended after the attacks in the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. News Channel 4 reporter Brian Thompson's at Newark Airport tonight following that part of the story for us. Brian?
Yeah, good evening, Chuck. You can see behind me the idea of the heightened security here at the airport. This is just the entrance to the Port Authority Administration building at the airport, but the whole airport is shut down. Before we go any further, though, I need to expound a little bit on what you said at the beginning of the newscast about that suspicious car in the Meadowlands. There is a report, and some of the Port Authority radio traffic, police radio traffic, is talking about the possibility, I emphasize possibility, that there were explosives in that car. New Jersey State Police are saying as of this evening that no determination has been made that those were actual explosives, that there is no direct link to what has happened earlier today, and the state police are saying at this point, contrary to at least one report out there, that there has been no arrests. Now that's all we can go with at this point as far as that is concerned. As for the airports, Mayor Giuliani is now saying that they probably won't reopen until 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, if by then. The FAA is saying that the air traffic system is closed at least until noon tomorrow. Either way, I have never heard a government official say that the air traffic system in America is at a standstill.
Terminal A is a crime scene. This is where the terrorists boarded United Flight 93, apparently taking control not long after the flight was airborne and crashing it in western Pennsylvania. Red Cross officials, among others, were here to offer comfort to family members being brought to the airport. Otherwise, this busiest airport in the tri-state was all but deserted. A few stragglers waiting for rides, somewhere between 100 and 200 people with nowhere to go actually staying inside the terminals. All day long, people had lined nearby highways to watch this tragedy from afar, culminating in the early evening with the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, marked by this billowing cloud of smoke and dust as though it were one more circle of Dante's hell. Clearly, there was a breakdown in security, a breakdown in intelligence, and nothing will be the same again.
I think that this is a disaster that is something we have never seen in our country, and I think a lot of things will be called into question as a result of it.
It remains to be seen exactly how that will change, but I can give you some very, very encouraging news that's been given to the police officers here, the Port Authority officers here. They understand 2 of their comrades in the last few minutes have been found alive in the rubble in downtown Manhattan. They say that it was helped, the situation, the search for them was helped by the fact they had cell phones that they were able to call out on to seek help, but that they have been pulled from the rubble alive, and these cops are very excited about that. As for New Jersey tomorrow, Governor DeFrancesco is saying that he is encouraging schools to go into session tomorrow, to not shut down as they have in New York, but for schools to stay open. He's encouraging people to go to their businesses, to go to work, unless, of course, they work in Manhattan, in which case he's urging them to try to stay away from Manhattan, as the mayor and the governor in New York have asked themselves. The state's attention tomorrow will turn, according to the chief of staff, whom I just talked to a few minutes ago, to housing, to getting businesses relocated, and most importantly, of course, to counseling for the many, many people in New Jersey who have lost loved ones for sure in this terrible, terrible tragedy, in this attack on humanity. Live at Newark Airport, I'm Brian Thompson, News Channel 4. Back to you, Chuck and Sue.
Brian, thank you.
Well, Brian, we just received word from NBC that they have confirmed the number of dead at the Pentagon at 800. Continuing on now, this day of disaster also brought out the best in people. Scott Weinberger is live in Lower Manhattan with the story of a man who waded through the rubble and saved at least 4 lives. Scott?
Sue, 1,000 rescue workers are still assembled here on the West Side Highway, waiting desperately for the green light to move in. But yes, as you said, tonight there is a story of survival told to us by a rescue worker just a short time ago. What was that?
The first person we rescued was probably like somewhere around 4 o'clock, 4:30. We just heard a cry for help, and we were just using manpower, shovels, pitchforks, whatever we can do, hands, just to dig these people out.
Army Reserve Private Angelo Acci has spent the better part of this tragic day digging for possible survivors. More than 8 hours after the terrorist attack, Private Acci says his team found 4 survivors alive under the rubble.
They're in a state of shock, and it's, you know, they are lucky to be alive. They must have some powerful guardian angels watching over them.
Several triage centers were set up across the city, including just 15 blocks north of Ground Zero, using the entrance of the Citibank building on Greenwich Street. Doctors treated and transported several patients, including this New York City police officer. Chelsea Piers also served as a triage center, more than 100 volunteer doctors and nurses on standby. But it's the people working at Ground Zero that say it may be days before we get a true sense of how many lives have been lost.
Hopefully there's more people. There's still hundreds and hundreds of Army people in there doing all we can to get the people out.
Now, in our travels today throughout the city, we did find thousands of New Yorkers willing to do anything to help out in this difficult situation. We're live along the West Side Highway. Scott Weinberger, News Channel 4. Chuck, Sue, back to you.
Scott, thank you.
And of course, anytime there is an event like this that portends war or conflict, the financial markets generally are hit fairly hard, and we are told now in Tokyo, the Nikkei is down sharply as the Tokyo markets open right now. The Port Authority, which operates the major bridges and tunnels and airports, has set up a temporary command center at the bus terminal on Manhattan's west side. And Darlene Rodriguez is there now with late details about travel conditions. Darlene?
That's right, Chuck. They held a news conference over an hour ago. They talked about transportation to and from the city for tonight and tomorrow on Port Authority facilities only. They did not talk about the investigation, although one of those planes that was hijacked did leave from Newark Airport. Port Authority officials here defer to the FBI. Now, officials here did state the obvious, and that is that tomorrow it will not be a normal commuting day.
The Port Authority airports, JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia are currently closed and likely to remain closed through at least tomorrow morning. Their reopening is subject to the direction of the FAA and other federal authorities. There is very little likelihood of eastbound traffic being allowed to use Port Authority, Hudson River bridges and tunnels into Manhattan tomorrow, except for credentialed personnel going eastbound.
Non-essential employees stay home if possible. Right now, the PATH train is operating to and from 33rd Street to Newark, Jersey City, and Hoboken. That is all subject to change. All 3 Port Authority bus terminals in the city are closed, as are all 3 area airports. There is no traffic in the air, as you well know, except for military planes. Port Authority did send 150 employees to the scene to aid in the rescue effort. We did hear a short time ago from our colleague Brian Thompson that the Port Authority officials are happy to know that 2 unaccounted for Port Authority police officers have been found alive in the rubble. That is the very latest here from Port Authority in Midtown. Darlene Rodriguez, News Channel 4. Back to you, Chuck and Sue.
Darlene, thank you. In the wake of this catastrophe, a special Mass was held tonight at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Edward Cardinal Egan devoted the Mass to the victims of the terrorist attacks. The cathedral was packed with hundreds of mourners, many of them dazed with unspeakable grief.
We'll stand guard.
It's time now for compassion and understanding. It's time to be the noble, decent, civilized, holy people we are.
Earlier today, the Cardinal had the grim task of administering last rites to a dozen victims.
Well, some of the trade center's 50,000 workers were seen leaping from windows to certain death, including a man and a woman holding hands. Some jumped from as high as the 80th floor. Of those that did survive, many were taken to St. Vincent's Hospital. News Channel 4 reporter Melissa Russo has been at the hospital all day. Melissa?
Sue, St. Vincent's is the closest trauma center to the World Trade Center, and today they've been dealing with the greatest number of critically injured patients. There are 327 patients being treated at the hospital at this hour. Most are being admitted, some 62 classified as critical at some point during the day, though some of them might now be stable, and about 55 of those are police and firefighters. The problem, though, here is not, as you might expect, a shortage of doctors or medical personnel. It's a shortage of patients.
Throughout the day, the victims arrived in waves, thick dust and rubble spouting from the ambulances as patients were unloaded by a virtual army of emergency room staff stationed on 7th Avenue. The early victims suffered a range of injuries, from burns to smoke and dust inhalation to cardiac arrest to blunt trauma. Hundreds of patients remain hospitalized at this hour. Many are police, firefighters, and emergency workers. But late this afternoon, the flow of ambulances slowed dramatically to 1 per 30 minutes, then 1 per hour, then almost none. The mayor, the governor, and the cardinal offered words of strength and hope.
Hatred, prejudice, anger, and irrational reaction to things is what caused this terrible tragedy. And people of the city of New York should act differently. We should act bravely. We should act in a tolerant way. We should go about our business, and we should show these people that they can't stop us, and they can't.
Everything that can be done in the search and rescue area, everything that can be done from the health and safety standpoint at places like St. Vincent's here is being done.
I'm amazed at the goodness of our police and our firemen, our firefighters. I'm amazed at the goodness of our hospital people. They're here willing to do anything they can. So once again, we thank New York for being here to handle this, and it'll be handled well.
You can see along 7th Avenue, the emergency personnel are still stationed outside the hospital, hoping and praying that there will be more survivors soon arriving at this hospital to treat. The hospital officials held a briefing within the last half hour. They said there was some encouraging news that emergency workers in Lower Manhattan were able to sift around some of the hot spots using listening devices. The hospital officials were informed that they did hear some signs of life, and so they are still at this hour bracing to treat as many people as they possibly can, although they expect that the injuries, the longer it takes to get those survivors here, will worsen. They're expecting to see kidney failure, they're expecting to see a lot of serious dehydration and some serious blunt trauma, but they are prepared for it and just hoping that those survivors will arrive as soon as possible. We are live at St. Vincent's Hospital. Melissa Russo, News Channel 4. Back to you.
Melissa, thank you very much. And we are getting word along the same lines that is hopeful and chilling at the same time. There was word from the Associated Press that some people trapped in the rubble are making phone calls out using their cell phones, calling for help. And the police commissioner, Bernard Carrick, says that they know where some of them are. So they are, the rescue is underway, and hopefully, of course, those people will be rescued.
Well, as you can imagine, some schools will be closed and businesses will be affected tomorrow. Jim Rosenfield joins us now with information.
Yes, Chuck and Sue, as Darlene mentioned, anything but a normal commute tomorrow and anything but business as usual for so many people. We're going to run down a list of closings as we have them right now. All New York City public schools tomorrow will be closed, but Chancellor Levy is asking principals, assistant principals, guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists, and crisis teams to report to their schools so that they can plan for this crisis in the coming days. New York Archdiocese schools also closed tomorrow. That includes Catholic schools in Manhattan, the Bronx, Staten Island, Westchester, as well as upstate counties. We also know of several independent schools closed in Manhattan tomorrow, and if you have any question about those private schools, you can obviously call the appropriate contacts at your child's school. Schools in Jersey City and West New York and New Jersey also closed tomorrow. Now, as for Wall Street, all the major stock exchanges will be closed tomorrow. Other businesses in Lower Manhattan, well, as for those, we heard Mayor Giuliani say people should stay away from that area tomorrow. He also suggested this might be a good day for other workers just to stay out of Manhattan, stay home with loved ones as well. There's also the matter of postal service. Mail collection is going to be affected insofar as postal service will not be picking up mail from those blue postal boxes that we see on the sidewalks here in the city. If you have a letter or a package that you absolutely have to get mailed, you're asked to go to your local post office. Those will be open. The Postal Service will try to deliver mail to the extent it can. And one last note, the state Senate will not be in session tomorrow as planned, and the entire legislative session for the rest of the week, we are told, is also in doubt. Tomorrow will be a day, Chuck and Sue, when a lot of youngsters will be home with their families, and one has to wonder, how does a parent explain Why?
It's a tough question.
All right, Jim, thank you. Well, transportation in and out of the city, as well as within the city, has been a mess all day long. Katie McGee from Shadow Traffic joins us now with information commuters will need for the morning. Katie?
Well, Sue, let's get you the very latest. Of course, this has been changing minute by minute as the day has progressed. Here are some of the latest updates we have for you for this evening, as well as, of course, tomorrow's morning rush. Now, as we heard from Governor Pataki, the city basically closed down south of 14th Street, so forget about any of those bridges and tunnels. For some specifics, let's talk about the George Washington Bridge. Right now, outbound upper level of the GWB, the only way to get out of town across the Hudson River. Inbound, you're going to find that closed down. Both tunnels closed down in and out of town. And as we heard just a short time ago from Darlene, these closures expected to remain in effect through tomorrow. Elsewhere, Throgs Neck Whitestone Bridge, those are open. Tolls have been suspended as well in both directions. Triborough Bridge, you can only get into the Queens or into Bronx. 59th Street Bridge, Midtown Tunnel, Queens-bound traffic only. Williamsburg Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, those are going to be pedestrian traffic only, outbound, inbound, no service at all. Battery Tunnel, Brooklyn Bridge, those closed down completely. The Tappan Zee Bridge at this point is open in both directions for you between Rockland and Westchester. Pretty slow go at this point in both directions, so you do want to keep that in mind. Some transit notes for you. Staten Island ferry service will be suspended. It is suspended at this point as well. Emergency personnel only. New York Waterway, what they're going to do tomorrow morning's rush hour, you will have service in and out of the city. However, that will only be running from 38th Street to Port Imperial, Lincoln Harbor, and Hoboken North. You will find normal service along the Haverstraw and Ossining branches. As far as trains, path service again is running, but only 33rd Street to Newark, to Hoboken, and to Journal Square. No intermediate stops within the city. New Jersey Transit at this point, limited service out of town. No word on any inbound service or when that will resume. Long Island Railroad Metro North at this point, both hoping to run a normal morning schedule tomorrow. That, of course, is subject to change, as is everything at this point. We'll keep you posted throughout the evening and, of course, all morning long tomorrow. One more note, if you are an emergency personnel worker and you are outside of Manhattan and would like to help out, you are being advised that you can get into the city. You will need proper credentials. Be prepared to stop and show them, but again, you will be able to cross any of the Hudson and East River crossings with proper credentials to help out. Chuck, Sue, that is the very latest. We'll keep you posted. Back to you.
All right, Katie, thank you.
Thanks a lot. We have one more note on school closings. We're now told that all the Catholic schools in Brooklyn and Queens are going to be closed in the morning, as well as the schools in Manhattan.
All right, well, as the reality of what happened settles in, investigators return to the question of who's responsible. Tim Minton is here with the latest on the focus of suspicion. Tim.
So, Chuck, at the top of the list is the top of the usual list of most wanted terror suspects. NBC News tonight quotes a U.S. intelligence source as saying there's evidence pointing with 90% certainty to Saudi exile Osama bin Laden.
Already indicted for an alleged role in the bombings of U.S. embassies in Africa, now the man who's publicly proclaimed a jihad against Americans is a prime suspect again.
He alone, probably within the Islamic world, has amassed and developed.
We're going to have to interrupt this for just a second because Mayor Giuliani is now speaking once again live at his command center. Let's go there now.
We really appreciate their efforts. It will be of great assistance all during the night. If you have questions that we can answer or try to answer, the number is 1-212-560-2730. That's 1-212-560-2730. I know that there's great concern over what the numbers of people lost are. We don't know the answer to that. The dimension will be very large. In terms of the people we're looking for, it's a couple of hundred firefighters and police officers, which is a staggering number. As far as the number of people in the building, that'll be in the thousands. But there's no way of knowing at this point, and we're going to keep praying and hoping that we save as many people as possible.
Mr. Mayor, there are reports that there are a group of survivors in the basement of the World Trade Center, that they have cell phones. They've been calling their relatives in Seattle to tell them precisely where they are, and that there's a group of NYPD police who are with them and alive and well. Do you know about this?
I know that rescue effort's been going on for a couple of hours, yes.
Mayor, do you know anything about the report about the possible explosives that were found in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think the police commissioner was able to get information about that.
I just got a confirmation from the chief of detectives. He's reached out to the FBI. They have confirmed that someone has been stopped in New Jersey 3 men in a van. However, there was no explosives in the van. All right, they're being held for questioning.
Where in New Jersey, sir? Do you know?
I can't say yet.
Okay.
Why were they stopped, and why do you think they're connected with this?
We can't tell at this point. It's between the FBI and the Port Authority. We just got the confirmation by phone after I left the last
Were
briefing.
they on the George Washington Bridge as they were heading to New Jersey?
No, they weren't.
There were rumors that there were explosives. Well, where did those rumors come from, or why did that begin to circulate?
I can't tell
Are
you.
they in the Meadowlands Police Commissioner?
Excuse me?
Are they in the Meadowlands?
It's my understanding, but we haven't confirmed that.
Do we know why they were stopped, sir?
Not yet.
Commissioner, can you tell us anything about the rescue of the 2 Port Authority officers or the ongoing effort with the people in the basement, where the Port Authority officers were pulled out of, or any of the details?
We can't say yet. It was Trinity and Church where the officers were that were just pulled out. The other people that are still in the building, we can't tell exactly where they are.
We all know that the Port Authority is housed in the World Trade Center. Any idea of the status of their operations?
They've lost a lot of people, and we don't know the full dimension of that either. But the Port Authority have a lot of people that are missing, and we were fortunate to find 2 of the police officers. We'll keep searching for the others, but they have sustained a lot of losses.
The group of people with the cell phones that Marcia referred to, do you have any idea how big a group that size is in that particular location?
I don't think we know the exact numbers. We know it's more than 2 people. It's two people communicated, and they say there were more people there.
And do
The
you
people
know
who are
what
roaming around the city trying to find information about those who are missing, what are they supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? And who's collecting that information?
The phone number that they should call is 212-560-2730. And then, as we have information about people either who have been recovered or are dead, we'll let them know that.
Is our morgue able to handle this?
We had a meeting with the medical examiner earlier, went over it with him. He believes that he's able to handle it. He'll start handling it at 30th Street, which is the morgue for Manhattan. He'll then be able to move up to the Bronx, where he also has facilities. And then we have the possibility of using the pier on the west side, which is set aside in case the numbers get too difficult to handle. But he thinks he can handle at least a good deal of it tomorrow and the next day, right in Manhattan.
Commissioner Bonas, can you talk about the loss of the fire department?
We've got over 300 people that are missing that we can't account for. We believe that many of them are gone. We don't. We'll keep looking. We have hundreds of people over there now trying to find as many possible locations that they might be in some way in a void or whatever, and still be able to breathe and still alive. But we believe that most of these people, I think, are going to be unable to pull out. So we'll just keep working on it. I have a number I'd like to give. We haven't been able to make any contact with the families because we're still unsure of the situation. So the number for the families who haven't spoken to their loved one in the course of this whole horrible day, if they call this number, we'll at least tell them that that this is a person that's missing, or that we have had some contact with this person. The number would be 718-999-2541 is a number that we'll be using at Fire Department headquarters.
What about
It's just for firefighters.
What about Chief Van?
Just for firefighters, firefighters and fire officers, EMS personnel. I would we'll man those numbers. That number will roll over to 10 lines, and we'll be able to just try to give them some information. We don't have a lot, so that's why we haven't been calling them like we would normally do.
What about the top members of your staff who may have been lost?
Deborah Wood.
I'm sorry, Deb.
What about the top members of your staff who may be lost?
We've notified their families already. Spoke to them earlier.
How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it? I don't know what to say. We lost people that have given over 40 years. Commissioner Feehan has had every job in the department. Probably the most valuable person in the department. When I got this job, Mayor and Commissioner Safer said, make sure you keep Bill Fian. Haven't regretted that one day. He's given a whole life to this department. Chief Gansey, the same thing, Chief of Department, 33 years, 34 years. Ray Downey, we just honored him with a dinner, almost 40 years of service, world renowned for situations like this, telling me how dangerous it was when we first got there, all the possibilities, everything that he was trying to do to, get the people out. Father Judge, I don't know if you know Father Judge, one of the nicest men you could possibly find in the whole world. We haven't found other people yet either. I don't even want to mention their names. Some of the best people in this department. I can't find anybody from 5 rescues and 7 squads, and it's just...
Commissioner Carrick, in the police department, do you have any idea how many people you're looking for at this time right now?
The number we're looking for is in excess of 233 people. That's what we know as of right now. And for the members, for the family members of the police department, if they have questions or they need to contact us regarding their family members, they can call 718-677-8238. It's the Special Operations Division, and we'll be able to help them as much as possible.
How close are rescue teams able to get to the scene, assuming there are people who are there?
The rescue teams are able to get very close now. It was very difficult during the day, but in most places they now can operate. There's still a few dangerous areas, but they're able to operate. They're able to operate down there now.
And are there pockets where people maybe?
Yes, we're very hopeful that there are pockets where there are people, not only the ones that we know about, but hopefully others. A group of firefighters were at St. Vincent's Hospital that were in a void for 4 or 5 hours, and we're hopeful that there are other situations like that, and that's why our rescue workers are working so furiously.
How big a group was that, Mayor?
That was a company. It was a group.
Company survived?
No, it was about 7.
Yeah, it's 5 guys in an officer.
5 guys
6.
survived.
Yeah,
6 men.
This was earlier today. They were in I believe one World Trade Center, and the firefighter described to me that they were there for about 4 or 5 hours, and when they walked out, they were shocked to see that the building had come down, because they knew there had been damage, but they had been in a void, so they had been protected.
What unit are we talking about there?
It was,
I'm not sure.
I forget.
We'll find out for you.
I think I remember, but I don't know.
Can you just tell us again about the 2 Port Authority police officers, how they were found, their condition?
No, the only thing we know is that they were found a while ago, that they're alive, and we'll get you more information about their condition.
And since we're talking about the Port Authority, I guess it's a reasonable assumption there's a large number of Port Authority police officers missing as well?
I'm sure there are. We don't have those exact numbers, as well as Port Authority personnel, the people who work for the Port Authority.
Wasn't their office in?
Yeah, their office was there, and so we don't know how many people were actually at work. The first attack was at about 8:50, and then there was time to evacuate a lot of the building. So we're not sure at this point how much of the 2 buildings were evacuated in that period of time between the first attack by the airplane until the first building came down. We're hopeful, because we saw a lot of people leaving. We all did at the time we were down there. We're hopeful that a lot of people got out of the building, but we don't know the numbers yet.
Maybe Commissioner Carrick could tell us a little bit about the high-ranking members of the department. I understand one was missing for a while, and you were able to find him. And I believe the police surgeon was medevaced out to New Jersey. Did I get that right? No?
No, not to my knowledge. Police surgeons accounted for the ranks that we're looking at and looking for are at the ranks of police officer and detectives, and perhaps a few sergeants.
Last question, Deborah Farrell. Last one, Deborah Farrell.
Is there a coordinated effort right now to find out who exactly may have not been in the building when this happened, or people just calling various companies? How will we find out who was there and who was not there when
Yeah,
this happened?
we're trying very hard by communicating with the Port Authority and some of the major tenants. We're trying to recreate how many people are there, but actually the major effort is really focused on trying to rescue people. The people who are out, I'm sure, have largely communicated with their families and are doing that. I saw many people doing that on the telephone as we were leaving. So really the focus of our efforts is to try to get as many people out as possible with the hope that there are still people that are alive, like the ones that we know about.
Mayor, you said earlier that there were several other buildings downtown that may be structurally unsafe that you were still not sure about and that in fact may collapse. Has anything changed from earlier today?
No, I think no, I don't think so. Not from the last time we had a briefing, and we were down there. And
5 World Trade Center, I heard, was in some kind of trouble. What's the status of 5 World Trade?
I don't know.
Still, they're going to wait for daylight, engineers to take a look at all these buildings.
I'm sorry.
We're going to wait till the daylight tomorrow. We'll have building and structural engineers check all these buildings that we're concerned about to make sure they're safe for rescue workers and to see what we can do to salvage these buildings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you can ask your last question. Go ahead.
How long
Go ahead. He's been trying. He's been trying for a while.
In terms of how long does the department expect the people to be able to survive underneath the rubble like that? I mean, is there some sort of...
There's no. They could survive for some time. There's no way to know exactly how long, but it really it depends. And I think one of the things that comes out of today is it depends on. I guess it depends on the will of God, or as to where you are, where you're standing, as this firefighter pointed out to us earlier.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify something Commissioner Carrick said, you were about 10 minutes past from when you were standing with several of the high-ranking officers who you lost, and then you went to Barclay Street. Have you thought about that 10-minute gap, how you were 10 minutes from being in a horrible situation?
I haven't had a chance to think about it yet.
But is that sort of accurate, that you would have been with them, you were with them 10 minutes earlier before the building collapsed?
Well, some of the people that we lost, we saw, like Father Judge and Chief Gansey, Bill Feehan. We saw them about 10 minutes before we went over to 75 Barclay Street. And as I talked to their families, and I explained to them that they were working very hard and they were working at what they love to do, and I'm sure their efforts will end up having saved other lives, and their families can be very proud of them. We have, without any doubt, the best police department, the best fire department, the best police officers, the best fire officers, the best emergency workers of any place in the whole world. And although today's tragedy is going to be enormous, and there's no way to minimize it, if it weren't for them, this tragedy would be far worse. I mean, they executed brilliantly today. And I having watched it, and having been a recipient of their services because we had to get ourselves out, I can tell you that whatever the number of casualties, without our police department, our fire department, our EMS, and the kinds of people that we have, many of whom lost their lives, there would be double or triple the number of casualties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have been listening to an emotional news conference with Mayor Giuliani and commissioners, the police commissioner Bernard Carrick, the fire commissioner Thomas Von Essen. Thomas Von Essen detailing the tremendous loss to his department. More than 300 firefighters missing and presumed dead. 32 police officers also missing. Terrible.
Many of those officers and firefighters going up on that first tower to rescue and evacuate people inside that building, and themselves losing their lives, perhaps, certainly missing tonight, and the fear is that they've lost their lives. The headlines here, there are 2 people, Mayor Giuliani says, who have been rescued tonight, 2 Port Authority police officers rescued in the vicinity of Trinity and Church downtown. The mayor says 1,000 to 2,000 rescue workers still working and will work throughout the night. As you said, just a distraught Thomas Von Essen saying that 300 firefighters now missing. And we should have one other note, Diana. The word, the rumor, the story that had circulated about a potential bomb being found in a truck that was stopped that had left the George Washington Bridge. Apparently the Port Authority did stop a suspicious-looking van. They found no bomb. There is no truth to that report. So
Okay.
that is good.
We want to go back to Nina Pineda, who is out at Beekman in Lower Manhattan. Let's go back to Nina. Nina?
Diana and Bill, you heard one of the reporters there in the mayor's press conference asking how close the rescue personnel could get to the World Trade Center. Well, we just came back from the World Trade Center Concourse Mall. The answer is rescue personnel are actually inside the craters that were both of the Twin Towers. They've been assisted by some iron workers who are actually standing on some beams. Bulldozers and backhoes are moving some of that equipment. The National Guard is standing there. But what they're doing is they're crawling through the craters and crevices of what's left. Up until an hour ago, they were telling us that they were still hearing people crying for help. You hear these sirens behind me, that's a good noise. You'd never think you would welcome that. That means they are transporting now victims back from what was a silent scene, because hopefully they've been able to move some of those people, have some survivors in their ambulances. We hear some of them coming now, and it was silent, Bill and Diana, for a long time tonight. But now that the ambulances are coming back from the World Trade Center where we just returned from, that means hopefully who's inside? Some survivors, and many of them were brought here to Beekman Downtown Hospital earlier tonight. Nightfall on this day of terror brought with it the grave reports from the rescue operation at what is left of the World Trade Center. As the casualties continue to arrive, those helping were among the critically injured. Those who were looking for survivors trapped 13 hours after the buildings crashed down, who became trapped themselves after building number 7 at the World Trade Center, badly damaged by fire, collapsed.
Well, we could just look around and barely see a little bit of light. We saw cops on the floor, firefighters on the floor, people reaching out and begging and saying, please don't leave me here, don't leave me here. I took maybe one guy and put him on the hood of his car that were dead, but most of them were jumping from the building. Whoever these poor souls are, they didn't make it out.
Much needed supplies are pouring in as heavy equipment mobilizes to carry the rubble away. Doctors at Beekman Downtown already tending to almost 400 survivors and awaiting many more.
They told us they'd be bringing injured over in a while, but we haven't seen anybody for the last hour or so. So I don't know whether or not it's just because it's too difficult to still get into that area or not.
As rescuers return from crawling around in what they say is a pitch-black crater, they say the cries for help are becoming more sparse. This ironworker searching for his sister-in-law presumes she is among the dozens, if not hundreds, that are now dead.
It's the biggest crawl space we got into, me and my fellow iron worker, what it was, close to 30 by 25 foot gap with 15-foot drop downs. We had no rope to propel down. Basically, we're just, you know, it's a horrible thing. It's a one big crater in the middle of the building.
You didn't spot any survivors?
No survivors. No survivors whatsoever. No survivors.
Again, within the last half an hour, some of the rescue personnel that were there on the scene reported telling us that they are hearing some people crying from the rubble. They were just in the last hour or two able to get some of those bulldozers and some backhoes into the area. The whole area is unstable and unsafe. They've had to really pick their way through what's left of both of the Twin Towers because it's strewn all through the World Concourse Mall and through the park neighboring near that. The numbers here at Beekman Downtown Hospital, they don't have exact numbers. They're telling us they've treated about 300 to 400 people for casualties. 3 people did arrive who had already expired, fatally injured from what happened this afternoon, or this morning rather. And also, they're treating several firefighters. As night fell and as that other tower came down, World Trade Building number 7, they had another wave, and what we're seeing right now is some more activity, which hopefully means there's some survivors on the way to the hospital. If anyone needs to reach someone at Beekman Downtown Hospital, they did release this number, 312-5106, 312-5106. We are seeing several ambulances heading from the World Trade Center back over to Beekman Downtown. Hopefully they're carrying some survivors in those ambulances. We're live in the Financial District. I'm Nina Pineda, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Well, we are hoping here too, Nina. Thank you. Over the next few days, we are going to hear many stories of desperate escapes and close calls. Our own Joe Torres, along with Eyewitness News photographer Glenn Mayros, barely escaped today's terror attack on the Trade Towers, and they made a frantic run for their lives. Joe is live in Lower Manhattan with his story. Joe?
Yes, Diana, Eyewitness News photographer Glenn Mayrose, who I had the privilege of working with today. We've now had several hours to sort of reflect, to look back, to look at the personal experience that we lived through today, and perhaps the most gut-wrenching, emotional time for us was when, after what seemed like hours on a cell phone, we finally got through to our wives and our loved ones and updated them. They were in the dark, like many of our colleagues back in the newsroom for a good portion of the day, did not know our whereabouts, did not know our condition. All this today, as we tried to tell a story, we almost became part of it. About 10 o'clock this morning, photographer Glenn Mayrose and I stood at 7 World Trade Center, the Twin Towers still piercing the clear blue sky. Moments later, a thunderous rumble.
Underground! I'm with you! Let's go! Underground! I'm with you!
We started running north on Church Street alongside police officers, FBI agents, emergency workers. We thought the ground below was about to explode. It seems now the sound we heard were the floors of the South Tower collapsing as the skyscraper tumbled to the ground. The expanding cloud of smoke and debris chasing us up the street. I screamed at Glenn, weighed down with his camera, batteries, and tapes, to keep moving.
Come on, Glenn, you can do it, man!
5, 6 blocks later, we stopped, our hearts racing, people crying, others gasping for air. As we caught our breath, Kevin McNeil explained to us how he got off the 85th floor.
Felt like a bomb went off. Smoke, everything was flying. We just had a hard time finding a way out. We found it, down we came.
Still on Church Street, thinking we were safe, we did an interview with a Port Authority engineer who worked on the 72nd floor of #1 World Trade Center. We never finished the interview.
They're very strong buildings, as you remember from the blast the last time. So,
But what does it take as an engineer to do the... Oh, no. Let's get ready. The frantic dash up Church Street resumed after the North Tower came down. When the horror would end, we had no idea. And the horror did not end. Of course, 7 World Trade Center, the building we were leaning on earlier in the day, tonight no longer standing. For those watching, wondering, why we do what we do. We get close to the scene. We try to document as best we can the events as they occur. Tonight, I think both Glenn and I can agree we got a little too close. Live outside the Trauma Center here at St. Vincent Center in Greenwich Village, I'm Joe Torres, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Joe, thank you. We're so glad you both are okay. We had a number of our reporters who were among the first on the scene this morning, among them Jim Hoffer, who also witnessed the terror when the World Trade Center towers collapsed. Here is his chilling account.
All night long, emergency crews headed down the West Side Highway for ground zero of the terrorist attack. But heading away from the scene in their dust-covered car were 2 brothers who narrowly escaped death. They were working outside right next to the North Tower when the first plane struck.
That's not real. It was a scene out of a movie. The people running from downtown, running up the streets, no shoes on their feet. Some people had their shirts were ripped off.
The Warren brothers, like thousands of other New Yorkers, had to run a race for their lives against a deadly rolling cloud of dust and debris created by the inconceivable collapse of the Twin Towers.
As you can see behind me, the second and last tower of the World Trade Tower has just collapsed. It is about 10:30 Eastern Time, and the tower has collapsed. We did not hear an explosion. There was no sign telling us previous any kind of warning that the building was going to collapse. The warning for us were people just running in our direction, and that's when we started to get out of the way. It is a scene out of Dante's hell, horrific. No World Trade Tower is standing. Time, 10:30, Lower Manhattan.
There was smoke everywhere and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
After the terrorist strike, U.S. fighter jets took to the air, too late to make any difference. New York City had become a no-fly zone, just like in a war. And somewhere tonight, terrorists are celebrating the apocalyptic destruction that has killed so many and forever changed America and its largest city.
It's just an act of cowardness. Anybody who does something like that, these people here are just trying to make a living, going to work. They're not combatants. They don't hold. We're just people trying to make a living, and these cowards attack us this way.
In Lower Manhattan, Jim Hoffer, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
President Bush called today's attacks the acts of a faceless coward. The question remains just who is this faceless coward? Is it an overseas terrorist group, and if so, which one?
Or is it, and it's a long shot, like the Oklahoma City bombing and attack by American citizens? We really don't know yet. Chief Investigative Correspondent Sarah Wallace joins us now with the developments on the national security front. Sarah?
Well, Bill and Diana, certainly there is a long way to go in this investigation, but there may be already some early clues. U.S. intelligence reportedly intercepted communications between supporters of fugitive Arab terrorist Osama bin Laden, and there were frantic cell phone calls from people on board at least 3 of the doomed jets describing the terror that was unfolding.
How did hijackers take over 4 passenger jets, apparently by sheer force, but their weapons surprisingly unsophisticated?
American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives.
A flight attendant on that plane called the American Operations Center, saying hijackers had stormed the cockpit. She was apparently able to give the seat number of one of the hijackers. A man on board the United Airlines jet that hit the second World Trade Tower reportedly made 2 cell phone calls, saying a flight attendant had been stabbed and the plane was going down. Moments later, on board another American jet, a similar call from the wife of a top Justice Department official. She said hijackers had used knife-like instruments to take over the plane, forcing passengers to the back. The top suspect with the money, the means, and the ability to mobilize this type of assault is Osama bin Laden, the fugitive Arab billionaire who was linked to scores of former terrorist attacks. Tonight, though, defense officials refused to say much at all about bin Laden.
Today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people.
The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack.
Thousands of FBI agents are being dispatched to each of the crime scenes and to locations around the world. And we have some late developments. We're being told that the FBI is prepared to search locations at in Broward County, South Florida, and Daytona Beach in Central Florida. Now, these locations may have links to a possible bin Laden supporter who was apparently listed on one of the passenger manifests on one of those jets.
When you say prepared to search, they mean search warrants have been issued for that.
Search warrants have apparently been issued.
A lot of people wondering, we've been talking about it all night, how in the heck? You can't get a computer or a cell phone on board without going through a metal detector. How do they get these knives? How do they get these box cutters?
Well, I think one of the questions is that has to be answered, and you don't want to really talk about this while this rescue effort is still underway, because that is a priority, but you have to look at this. I mean, this was a breakdown apparently in security, not at one airport, but on three airports, at least, several planes. The same scenario seems to be played out on at least several of these planes. Hijackers with knives who managed to get on board, who managed to rush the cockpit. Now, the big question, of course, is whether or not they took over the planes and flew into the buildings. That would certainly be logical, because as one expert said to me, you're not going to have a pilot with a knife or a gun against his head that would agree, no matter what, to fly into a building with passengers.
They would ditch
plane.
it into the river rather than going to the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Just want to add some information here. We have been told that there have been 4 deaths at St. Vincent's. I do not know if those are additional. I believe they are, because we have reported that there have been other fatalities that happened at St. Vincent's Hospital. And we understand that several police officers are also being treated at St. Vincent's. And of course, as new information comes in, we'll continue to bring it to our viewers.
Continue on the vein Sarah was talking about tonight. The United States is denying any connection or responsibility to several explosions that shook the capital of Afghanistan, the country where terrorist Osama bin Laden is supposedly in hiding. Now, the explosions near the airport in Kabul just hours after the attack on the World Trade Center. At first, many thought the U.S. had caused the explosions because Afghanistan has been shielding bin Laden, who of course has been tied to several other terrorist acts against the United States. All commercial airlines, of course, are grounded until at least tomorrow nationwide. Celeste Ford has been at Kennedy Airport all night, and she is there now again with that part of the story. Celeste?
Bill, right now we're at the Holiday Inn right next to Kennedy Airport. This is one of several perimeter hotels where stranded passengers will be spending the night. There aren't enough rooms, and at this one location, we know that at least 100 people will be spending this night on the floors. Today, for the first time in history, the Federal Aviation Administration froze the skies nationwide. It will continue like this, as you pointed out, until noon tomorrow at the earliest. Roughly 2 million passengers in this country alone have been affected. They lay on the floor, on cots, or propped themselves up in chairs. The Port Authority says 2,000 airline passengers are stranded at Kennedy Airport and are spending the night at nearby hotels. All the rooms were quickly filled, and the airlines asked hundreds of people to make do. This tourist was supposed to be en route to Australia.
I'm happy to be inside and not stuck in the airport.
And you'll be sleeping on the floor?
Yeah, it's fine. Seriously, when you put it all into consideration of what's happening outside, we're lucky.
The airlines say they're doing what they can.
By the time we tried to contact all the hotels, there were no more rooms available, so we tried our best to take them out of the terminal.
As night fell, the billowing smoke from lower Manhattan, backlit by the sunset, could be seen all the way from Kennedy Airport. The complex is almost empty, and when it reopens, security will be tighter.
I think after any incident over the last 10 years, there has been a reaction federally and through the Congress where level of security has increased.
The airport's closed at 9:48 in the morning. In Newark, officers swept the terminals using bomb-sniffing dogs. At LaGuardia, Port Authority police were on high alert. Officers say they struggled with a loss in phone service, as did many passengers. Thousands were told to evacuate. They lined the access roads, waiting for information, transportation home, and anything that would ease their fears.
It's a very, very sad day for our country. Very sad. So we all need to be grateful, and we all need to find out who did this horrible, horrible thing to our country.
This evening, the manager of Kennedy Airport told me that in the very near future, we can expect to see less access to the airports. One example, family members and friends might not be permitted to greet incoming planes. Now, tomorrow, the Federal Aviation Administration must weigh the risk to air travel, including the possibility of more hijackings as it makes its call. We're told that whatever happens, if the flights do resume tomorrow, we can expect delays and all sorts of disruptions through the end of the week. We're live in Jamaica, Queens. Celeste Ford, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Absolutely. Okay. Celeste, of course, it is not just the airports that are closed at this hour. Many roads, trains in and out of the city have been shut down as well.
For more on how to get around, we go to Shannon Sohn. She is on the ground in metro traffic because our chopper can't fly either. Shannon?
Yeah, no choppers flying today, but I can tell you that not much is going to be changing for the next day or so. We were hoping that things would be opening up to heading into the city by tomorrow, but the Port Authority now telling us that's not going to happen. So we'll go to the maps and show you what you have in store for tomorrow morning. This is what they're telling us. While they said that it might have reopened, that looks like a thing of the past, and the Lincoln Tunnel and Holland Tunnel closures that are in place now are going to stay in place, as well as that one at the George Washington Bridge. Of course, going outbound right now, if you want to do that, you can certainly do that at only the 59th Street Bridge and the George Washington Bridge. So those are the things that you need to keep in mind right now. Otherwise, a bit of good news for folks who are trying to get to Staten Island. You know, you were able to do it if you were heading out of Brooklyn. That was open. Still the Jersey-bound lanes are not open heading into Staten Island. That would be the Goethals Bridge, the Outer Bridge Crossing, and the Bayonne Bridge. But the Verrazano Bridge now open in both directions, so that's a bit of a change for you. Otherwise, we want to take you into the city and show you what you're going to have in store for you in terms of mass transit. This is what's on tap for tomorrow. LIRR They are back on a regular schedule. Everything is operating as it should be, and that is official as of now, and it should be in place tomorrow as well. New Jersey Transit, on the other hand, is on a load and go service out of Penn Station for services on the Northeast Corridor to Trenton, North Jersey Coastline to Bay Head and Long Branch, and Midtown Direct to Dover. Outbound, Hoboken Terminal operating load and go again. That means no inbound service, which basically tells us no buses into or out of the Port Authority and the George Washington Bridge Terminal. Now, Metro North are on a Saturday schedule now. They should return to normal by tomorrow. PATH trains, both ways between 33rd Street and Newark Hoboken. That is where the service is, but they are not stopping between 33rd and Christopher Street. So a bit of a glitch in that. Subways telling us limited service, and I will give these to you in alphabetical order to make it easy. A, B, D, E, F, G, L, N, Q, R, and W. Those are the ones that are operating but on limited services, as well as the 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 trains. Now, Amtrak has resumed its entire Northeast Corridor, so there's your good news. So things are getting back on track in terms of mass transit. It looks like if you want to head into the city tomorrow, that is going to be the only way to do it. Once again, Port Authority announced very late that they are not going to open up any of the crossings heading into the city. Again, outbound, you can do it, but you're stuck with mass transit if you want to come into the city. Reporting live, Shannon Stone, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
So Shannon, if you're thinking about getting in your car tomorrow morning coming into the city, not going to happen, right? Okay, we don't have Shannon there anymore. Anyways, that is the word. Don't get in your car and trying to come to the city because you won't be able to get in. We do have Art McFarland. He is live right now for us at the Lincoln Tunnel to tell us about the situation there. Art.
It certainly does not appear that you would be able to come into the city, Diana, using the Lincoln Tunnel tomorrow. It is closed indefinitely. Of course, after today, nothing is unthinkable, and that would include, as far as authorities are concerned, an attempt to attack one of the river crossings, one of these vital links into Manhattan. This one, of course, from New Jersey, as well as the George Washington Bridge. You heard those reports earlier that people were questioned at the bridge, and that, of course, led some of the bus drivers here outside the Port Authority bus terminal to turn back. They were trying to go to New Jersey over the bridge. Earlier, they had to turn back. Of course, no explosives were found. But based on our conversations with Port Authority police, authorities have indicated that the Hudson River crossings are considered to be potential targets. The Lincoln Tunnel is never this quiet or empty of all traffic. Only occasional emergency or law enforcement vehicles are being allowed through. Buses that would be roaring through the tubes stand idle, and even this NJ Transit mechanic had nothing to do.
Nothing's running right now, but we're waiting for the tunnel to open up to maybe we could make it back to the garage.
How soon do you think that might happen?
I hope soon. I'm exhausted.
Late today, for a short time, one lane of outbound traffic was allowed to trickle through, each vehicle inspected by bomb-sniffing dogs. Before that, some pedestrians were begging to walk through the tunnel toward their New Jersey homes. Among the stream of those walking by the tunnel plaza toward ferryboat stations on the Hudson and following a 2-hour walk from downtown were office workers from what was the World Trade Center who escaped after the first explosion. There have been a number of people here at the toll plaza wanting to walk right through the Lincoln Tunnel over to New Jersey, as we reported to you. A man this evening arguing with Port Authority police. Emotions, of course, running high. But again, there is no word yet as to when the Lincoln Tunnel might be opened. Some officials have told us it might be closed all week long. They just don't know. They also say, do some NJ Transit authorities that spoke to us, that the FBI has a say into how soon these tunnels might be open. So it is a waiting game to see when these access roads or these access ways into Manhattan will be available. For now, we're live at the Manhattan Plaza of the Lincoln Tunnel. Art McFarland, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Good job all day out there. Thank you, Art. Well, if the goal of the terrorists was to shut down the city and the country tonight, they have in a very real way succeeded. Of course, this is not an acceptable way to live in a democracy, but in fact there are many closures tomorrow in and around the city we have to tell you about, including school closures. Rob Hanrahan has been keeping track of all that. He's in the newsroom for us. Rob?
Many of these, of course, Bill, as you know, in the name of safety. Here are some of the closures and changes we have in store for tomorrow. All New York City public and parochial schools will be closed. But the chancellor is asking that all public school principals, assistant principals, guidance counselors, social workers, and the crisis teams to report into the schools. You see, those people will begin forming plans to help the children deal with the tragedy. Also have to tell you, there will be no mail pickup in parts of New York City, in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. Post offices will be open, but there will not be any collection from street mailboxes. Delivery will be made as long as carriers can reach the building. If not, the customers will be informed as to where they can pick up their mail. I should also tell you that the Red Cross in Nassau County is asking for mental health volunteers to help people deal with this disaster. The Empire State Building will be closed on Wednesday. All businesses below 14th Street in Manhattan will be closed, including Wall Street. And the Borough of Manhattan Community College on Chambers Street is closed tomorrow. All other CUNY schools are going to be open, so keep that in mind. And the Brooklyn Center of Long Island University is canceling classes for tomorrow. All non-essential employees at LIU Brooklyn are being told to stay home. St. John's University is canceling all classes along with NYU for Wednesday. The offices are closed except for essential staff. And for the first time, as you probably heard, since D-Day back in 1944, Major League Baseball canceled all of its games today, and the NFL and college football are going to announce a decision about the games scheduled for this weekend sometime later this week. The Emmy Awards and the Latin Grammys, scheduled for a few days from now, have also both been postponed, and as you may know, today's primary election has also been put on hold. Far from a normal day on Tuesday, it will certainly be far from normal on Wednesday. Diana, Bill, back to you.
You are absolutely right. Thank you so much, Rob. Tonight, New Yorkers shaken by today's events turned to prayer. Many of them went to Mass, led by Edward Cardinal Egan at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Sandra Bookman has that story.
New Yorkers and tourists alike walked through the doors of St. Patrick's Cathedral this evening, seeking solace in the wake of the day's horrifying events. Some trying to understand how the steel symbols of American might could crumble so quickly. Others holding fast to faith when the seemingly infallible failed.
It's hard for me even to believe, but I know that out of every tragedy, there comes a greater good.
Among those offering prayers for the day's victims and commendations for the city's emergency response, former New York Mayor Ed Koch.
You can be very proud of this city and the way it responded to this terrorist act. You have to grieve for your fellow New Yorkers.
Look kindly on us in this hour of our suffering.
Edward Cardinal Egan led the Mass and delivered the homily tonight, saying he'd seen New Yorkers at their best in the worst of situations today. And he stressed this is not the time to focus on retaliation.
In the style of civilized people, we will bring them before the court of justice.
Later, the Cardinal told reporters he'd spent more than 3 hours in Lower Manhattan. He'd seen the second of the 2 towers come down and had delivered last rites to several of the injured at St. Vincent's Hospital. Still, he insisted his faith in God, in New Yorkers, and in the country is unwavering.
Certainly we've been shaken, but we haven't been shattered.
Sandra Bookman, ABC 7, Eyewitness News.
And the Archdiocese has confirmed tonight that a New York City Fire Department chaplain, Father Michael Judge, was among those killed in today's Trade Center attack.
Danny, we're told that some heavy-duty equipment is now moving into Lower Manhattan. Rescue equipment, we're told. This is a live picture of that. It looks like a bulldozer coming in to actually remove the rubble. We are told a few minutes ago by Mayor Giuliani's office that 1,000 to up to 2,000 rescue workers will be working, and apparently now we understand they're going to be working through the night looking for what could be thousands of missing people, including 300 firefighters and 33 police officers.
We have Jeff Rossin on the scene. Jeff, fill us in on what's happening right now.
I just spoke to a couple of the drivers of these bulldozers. We've seen more than a dozen of them come down Church Street. They say they're heading up Broadway. They are here to take the rubble away from the scene as much as they can get their hands on away from the scene, because the sooner they can get that rubble taken away, the faster they can find those victims that supposedly have been calling police on their cell phones trapped alive. So that is the priority right now, and we are seeing that heavy-duty equipment come on through. Again, they're going to come down Church, around this street. This is Duane right here. Then they're going to go up Broadway back to the World Trade Center, try to get that rubble out of here.
Just to make this clear, Jeff, if there were any doubt tonight that some of this operation would be held until daybreak, apparently that has been put to rest, right?
Certainly put to rest. You heard the mayor say it, and we're seeing it firsthand. It's not nightfall that's going to hurt them, it's all the dust. We've seen more of that getting kicked up. In fact, I was coughing just a couple of minutes ago. That hasn't happened to me for about an hour and a half or so. But they have brought lights here. We saw that about 5 o'clock tonight. They were prepared. We were all impressed about how prepared they really were. And we'll shoot down Church Street here and give you a live picture. You can see they have the scene very well lit. That doesn't seem, according to fire officials we've spoken to be a major problem. Nightfall, it's the dust. They are certainly prepared. They will work through the night, but certainly daybreak will help.
Jeff, is it your understanding that they are still hearing voices, that they're still hearing from people buried in the rubble?
Hard to confirm that. We're just going by what we've been hearing, and like you've been hearing from Mayor Giuliani, that they have those cell calls. And I spoke to one gentleman who was around when they saved those 2 Port Authority officers. He says they actually had to amputate one of their legs. Certainly a horrible scene that he didn't want to speak about, and you can't blame him.
Jeff, we just want to tell you, Jeff, for your information, Sam Champion is also sitting here with us, and he tells us the winds right now about 5 miles an hour. Tomorrow they're expected to kick up anywhere from 7 to 14, so I think they want to do as much of this work if dust is going to be a problem.
Yeah, that is yeah, exactly. And Sam was reporting earlier that about 7 miles an hour. And you know, you have some papers blowing around in the dust, and of course all the emergency vehicles coming through doesn't help either. That kicks up a lot of the dust, but higher winds will certainly mean a tougher task for these firefighters.
All right, you've done a yeoman job out there, Jeff. We're going to ask you to stay there. We don't know how long we'll be on tonight, but we may come back to you before the end of this
We are here all night for you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. What in the world, many of us have been talking this evening, what in the world do we say to our children about this incredible, horrific day? What happens to the people who witnessed firsthand the death and destruction, and how do you explain it? How can you help?
It certainly is a question all of us have asked, and Dr. Jay Adlersberg is here with some answers for all of us. Jay?
Diana, Bill, of course, there's no easy way to explain today's events to children. The childhood specialist we interviewed said the most important thing for families is to stay close to their kids. Children watching these images are sure to be upset. An expert we spoke to said parents should try to explain what happened in simple language young children can understand. It's black and white.
It's black and white, and you said these are very bad men and very bad people, and our government and all of us are going to get them.
Children older than 12 and adults should do something to master the situation, to be part of the solution.
The best way I think of is giving something to the community, donating time, donating blood, getting involved with religious groups, with cultural groups at school, ways to give back, talk about, volunteer one's time.
Dr. Rosenthal stressed that parents should be calm, not show panic or fear, because the child may pick up on this and become more anxious.
Kids pick up everything that you feel, and if you're anxious and you're upset, they're going to feel insecure and upset as well. If you give a calm exterior, that you have a sense of control over the situation, they're going to read that from you, and it's going to help calm them down.
In the next week or so, parents should watch for symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, crying, irritability, nightmares, and disobedience, including refusing to do homework. Kids may be depressed and withdrawn. If you see these signs in your child, consult a mental health professional. In adults, post-traumatic stress symptoms include nightmares, vivid flashbacks of the day's events, outbursts of anger and depression.
Women are likely going to be more vocal about what they're feeling than men are. This may take weeks to really come out. If you, on the other hand, are having sleep disturbance, trouble concentrating, bouts of anger and irritability, confusional states, things like that, then you're probably going to need professional help.
That was Dr. Richard Rosenthal, the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital Center. Adults and kids with the symptoms we described should be encouraged to express themselves, keep a journal, talk to friends and family. Just like lancing a boil, the more that comes out, the better. For more on how to cope and how you can cope and help your children cope, see our website at 7online.com. Bill and Diana.
Very good advice. I've already practiced it tonight several times with my children. My little 6-year-old boy said, I know, Dad, some bad guys knocked down the World Trade Center. And we got to keep close to our kids. There's no question. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much, Jay. We want to go now to Jim Dolan, who's in the newsroom, to kind of recap and talk again about the incidents today.
Diana, even when it started, before we ever knew how terrifying the day would turn out, it seemed as bad as anything that had ever happened here. It was before 9 o'clock when a Boeing 767 hijacked out of Boston slammed into the first tower of the World Trade Center. But maybe we hoped it was an accident. It was hope that was dashed in the most clear and brutal way moments later. Take a look. That's when a second hijacked aircraft crashed into the second tower, clearly a highly organized, savagely efficient attack on America's premier symbol of capitalism. Outside Washington, the Pentagon would be attacked before long by yet another hijacked aircraft. You're looking now at another angle of that second attack. A fourth hijacked plane was ditched in Pennsylvania, and even as people rushed to escape, this is again another angle of the second plane. As people rushed to escape the Trade Center, the Twin Towers collapsed in a mountain of smoke and debris, first one and then the other, taking with them a still untold number of civilians and rescue workers. In the massive effort that followed, hundreds would be treated at area hospitals. Some were pulled from the debris. Some remain trapped at this hour. The president declared it a major disaster, and clearly it was all of that. There are no final numbers of casualties yet. Clearly those figures will be numbing. The full and devastating breadth of this brutal orgy of terror only now becoming clear. Again, hundreds injured, surely more than that are dead, and as if all the images of today were not stark enough, there was another sight by day's end. U.S. military warships steaming toward New York and Washington to protect our coastline from further attack. The rescue effort will go through the night, and probably it will go through the week. And so New York today has changed. We want to point out, of course, as we've been saying throughout the day, that schools will be closed, both private and public schools. 14th Street, south of 14th Street, Manhattan will be closed tomorrow as this rescue effort and investigation continue. Bill and Diana.
Stand by. All right, thank you, Jim. We're trying to bring in Sam Champion. Sam, is your mic working?
We are switching mics.
I hear you. I hear Sam Champion right now. All right, so we mentioned earlier to Jeff Rawson the wind could play a factor here with the dust rising up in this rescue effort. We want to quickly turn to Sam, who's been following these day's events. And Sam, tell us what's in store for tomorrow.
Well, the most important thing I think that a lot of folks, rescue workers and anyone who's involved in clearing the debris or looking for survivors, needs to know about our weather pattern over the next few days is that it is dry and it is calm. The winds are expected to stay from a fairly northern direction, north-northwest, at least about 7 miles per hour. Right now, they're at about 5 miles per hour. And if you can go ahead and go to the weather computer graphic, and I'll show you exactly what's expected. Tonight, north at about 4 to 8 miles per hour. Wednesday, northeast to southeast at 7 to 14 miles per hour. Wednesday night, south to southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Generally light winds, but again, part of the problem that we found out today with our area is the canyoning effect. Our buildings are so narrow and close together, it's a lot like winds rushing through mountain valleys. The winds will pick up speed at those lower ground levels when they're trapped in between buildings. That's going to kick up the dust and debris. But you can generally see we're looking for a fairly clear to dry weather pattern over the next couple of days. And did we want to go into more detail, or do we just want to go ahead and go to the forecast?
We get the forecast.
Okay.
You have time
Let's
for
go ahead and go to the forecast. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, clear skies, and again, fairly light winds at about 60 degrees. For the rest of the day tomorrow, it's expected to be clear, dry, sunny skies at about 78-degree temperature. And the 5-day plan shows you what we're looking for is probably some showers with a front that moves through Thursday night into early Friday morning, but at least there's Wednesday and Thursday that appear to be fairly dry days. As we get past that cold front, definitely much cooler weather moving in.
And at least weather is on the side of those rescuers who are in that area, at least for the next 24,
definitely favorable for removing the debris and looking for the folks that are
The rain would not be so good for efforts right now. All right.
No rain.
Thank you, Sam.
Certainly the words are hard to find to describe the horrors of what we have all witnessed today.
Bill Butel has tried, and he has a final thought.
Finally, a new day is about to begin. The one just passed was cruel beyond understanding. We lost so very much. Nobody can say how many Americans died in the massive tragedy born of hatred carried to the point of insanity. We are a strong and tough people, but tonight we are wounded and we bleed. I'm Bill Butel. Good luck and be well.
And we do indeed all bleed. What a day it has been for all of us. I would say thank you for watching, but it sort of seems ludicrous. I want to say thank you to all of our crews out there who at times did risk their own health and safety to bring you this story. That is it for us for now. I'm Bill Ritter.
I'm Diana Williams. We want to let you know that our coverage will continue at 5 a.m., but we will be here throughout the evening, so as warranted, we will break in with information as it becomes available to us. For all of us here at WABC, have a good night, everyone, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Community and the